Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the University of Tennessee Supply Chain Webinar Series. The goal of this series is to provide you with some insights into some of the innovative research. Professor of Supply Chain at the University of Tennessee, and he's our lead faculty with expertise in purchasing and logistics. Good afternoon, folks. Purchasing operations, sorry, correct that. And logistics too. We're making you. That's right. My name is Ted Stank, and I'm the Bruce Chair of Business and Supply Chain Management here at UT, and my expertise area is in logistics. And it's interesting to bring up those two expertise areas. I bring that out for a reason. Ken and I have been working here together for a little over 2 years now. One of the things that we have really discovered is that logisticians and purchasing people speak the same words and mean a lot of different things sometimes when they talk. And our experience in trying to get together on the same page in terms of our goals for supply chain management and the way we manage the parts of our supply chains that we have responsibility for can be very different. And it's taken a lot of time for us to try to get that together. Now, not surprisingly, Ken and I both in our careers have seen these same challenges when we interact with industry. That purchasing people tend to work apart from logistics people and really very rarely cross paths, rarely work in the same organizations, and not surprisingly have a lot of conflicting metrics, competition for resources, etc.
And oftentimes in a lot of the businesses that we work with, you'll find purchasing in two locations, right? You find
Logistics manager, and they say, "Oh, sure, we do purchasing. We have to buy transportation. We work with third-party logistics firms, etc." And there is purchasing going on there. Yet the standalone global purchasing organization that buys all the organization's material needs generally is apart from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you look at it from the other perspective, oftentimes, purchasing managers or commodity or category managers are sourcing globally and making decisions about where to put their spend, where to buy globally, and they need that really great information from the logistics competency about, transportation costs and so forth. And in fact, they can't get it, so they end up making decisions that don't enhance the best customer value, the best business value.
Right, right. So let me tell you a little bit about how we've gotten to this point. Ken and I work in a department at UT called the Department of Marketing and Supply Chain Management. And in that department, we work with folks engaged in consumer marketing, in sales, in demand planning, as well as in many of the supply chain functions of transportation, logistics, purchasing, operations, etc. And our overarching philosophy on how we believe organizations should run themselves is what we call the integration of demand and supply, integrated demand and supply management. And what we mean by that is that there is a need for coordination between demand-focused activities, think marketing and sales, and supply-focused activities, think of all the different supply chain operational activities, so that we can dramatically influence an increase in revenue, a decrease in cost, and better management of assets. And we have seen that work in organizations, and that really forms the philosophy behind a lot of the work that we do, and incidentally, something we'll talk a little bit about before, the curriculum that drives a lot of our programs. So really, in a word, what we're talking about is interfaces, and the interfaces among the different elements within the organization and across organizations. Within the supply chain itself, there's lots of interfaces. Ken and I have already talked about the one between purchasing and logistics. But there's lots of interfaces between many different activities that have to occur within the firm and across firms. Ken, you're probably familiar with the really popular SCORE model that talks about supply chain consisting linearly of a series of activities ranging from planning, sourcing, making, and delivering.
It's really interesting, though, Ted. I do know about the model, but from my perspective and my experiences, really look at this from a plan, source, make type of perspective. And quite honestly, because of my functional bias, I really don't know that much about delivery.
Yeah. I mean, if you will, for now, let us use a manufacturing supply chain as an example. What we often see is that manufacturing forms kind of the fulcrum of a supply chain, and there's really two different supply chains that operate within that overall broader supply chain. The first one, based in manufacturing, looks upstream to suppliers. consists of planning for supply, actually buying product and getting it into a manufacturing facility so it can be used to make a final good. And there's another supply chain based out of manufacturing that looks downstream to customers. And that's involved with production scheduling and planning, understanding what is needed in different distribution capacity areas for distribution planning, and the actual physical movement of product downstream to customers. So plan, make, deliver, if you will. We've seen that a lot. Our next slide kind of addresses that picture. Now notice those two guys at the top there.
Which one am I?
You're probably the guy with the knife in my back. I'm feeling like a sore back in an operational activity, with one focused on providing the material needs of the organization, and the other one focused on getting the value-added form that the organization creates, whether it's a product or a service, out to customers. And very seldom do those two share plans, share resources, make decisions in a joint, unified fashion to optimize the performance of the whole.
So, in your view, Ted, what's this looks like an opportunity space for me as I stare at this slide. I hope others on the call see that opportunity as well. How would you characterize that opportunity for business today?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great question. If you want to talk financially, I think that the opportunities of bringing together decisions and aligning decisions between purchasing and logistics have significant impact on overall costs. If you include logistics costs in the total cost perspective, so not only cost of goods sold for materials, but also the cost of service and general sales and expenses, etc. If you include those in there, there is significant opportunity to reduce those overall costs if we make decisions in unison. In addition, there's opportunities for us to enhance the value creation proposal for our customers, so we can do better things for our customers on a lower cost basis, and so potentially enhance significant improvement if we make better aligned decisions.
That's pretty exciting.
As you said, there's certainly an opportunity space there. So one of the questions I've always asked is, how does that happen? We've spent, 40, 50 years talking about business strategy and the need for functions to align with the overall business. I mean, there's been a good 30 to 40 years of literature in academic spaces and business focused on that. I think what we see is that a lot of progress has been made in aligning the functional areas of the supply chain with the overarching business strategy. That's important, that all organizations have their functional parts marching to the same business tune. And as we talk to business leaders across the functions, they certainly believe they do that. Yet rarely do they try to ensure that they align between the functions. There's an assumption that if we're aligned with the overall strategy, we must be aligned with each other. What do you find when you talk to people? You think that's true?
I think that there is a greater chance of natural alignment to occur between the manufacturing and purchasing groups, right? Or the manufacturing and logistics.
Because they're directly touching each other in the supply chain.
Absolutely, right? One's a customer of the other. Where I think so, but I still think there's opportunity for alignment there, and I think there's opportunity to improve the alignment of functions with business strategy. The biggest, for me, looking at this slide, thinking about it, the biggest opportunity may well be in important areas of the supply chain business, providing that customer value that don't have that natural connection. And obviously in this case, we're talking about procurement, sourcing, and we're talking about delivery, logistics. Mm-hmm. They aren't customers of one another directly as material moves through the supply chain. So there's no natural system to get them in balance.
Sure. And this is a little bit contrived for those of you listening in, but Ken and I have had real conversations about this before, so I'm going to ask Ken a question. If you put your purchasing hat on, right? Not your purchasing supply chain, but your purchasing hat, right? It's on. If I were to ask you, what is the overarching performance metric that you would drive to as a performance manager? I mean, purchasing.
It'd be purchase price variance, right? It would be reducing the cost of materials to have a positive effect on cost of goods sold. It's a big lever.
So if I'm that Logi managing the materials warehouse, and you buy 3 trainloads of product because you get that lower purchase price, and I say to you, dude, you're killing me. because you just brought in 3 train loads of product and I have to store it and I have an inventory metric and you just killed it. But what's your response?
It's not in my measurements.
Tough darts, pal, right? Okay. And then downstream on the customer side, we could say to you, you're buying all these products and you're doing it in such a way that enables you to lower your cost of good metrics. But I'm really concerned with serving customers. If you would buy differently, it would enable me to enhance my service metrics to customers. Because that's what I'm really worried about. Comment to that?
Well, what's really, just to kind of go down that same road, but take the flip perspective for a second, right? So if you think about this large company you and I have worked with from the logistics and transportation group on the cost to move things around the world, because they're making sourcing decisions fairly early, right, in product life cycle, and they're setting up these relationships, which could be halfway around the world, where the customer happens to be located for this product, and they go to logistics to try to get this information, and the logistics group is not staffed to handle that workload, and it's not incentivized to do that, right? So you see this, this kind of crazy disincentive system on both sides that prevents that really nice total cost of ownership, total value ownership type of decision being made. And so, from an academic standpoint, optimizing at the functional level does not produce optimization at the system level.
So in many ways, what Ken and I are seeing is an ever-enlarging definition of total cost of ownership. Right? I mean, there was a time where we really just focused on unit functional cost. And then we got enlightened about the need to really focus on a more integrated picture, that you can't just focus on unit transportation costs because of what it does to inventory and warehousing costs. Purchasing, it wasn't just what you buy it at, but some of the other costs associated with serving material, et cetera. What we're talking about now is really expanding that total cost definition to include the entire end-to-end supply chain. So what that has driven us towards is really try to figure out a way to do what we've called bend the supply chain. How can we get that sourcing part closer together and aligned with the delivery part, with the purchasing organization, with the logistics organization? And we have engaged in a new research project that we're probably a year old in, and are just now collecting our first data set and conducting interviews to really understand what some of the best practices are around a leadership model that provides a framework for best practice in aligning purchasing. Is regarding this need to align the different parts of the supply chain, particularly purchasing and logistics. Another building block are what are those core capabilities? What are the essences of being able to align purchasing and logistics?
And those really boil down to specific joint strategies. So if you take it from a procurement perspective, we think about commodity category strategy as being that central strategizing element for procurement spend. From a logistics perspective, that might really be a strategy around fulfillment.
It's order fulfillment strategies and differential strategies to different customers.
And what we're proposing as one element of, as an example of core supply chain capabilities, is that when you look at these two things together, right, you can generate a lot more aligned value. And that's really, if you look at each one of these boxes, there really are lots of things in those giving you a high-level picture of these. So there might be 16 or 17 strategies in that core box.
Okay. The other two elements of the leadership model is one of them is focused on performance metrics. How do you measure success in your organization? And different organizations measure that differently. We have found that depending on how you define success will really have an influence on how you run those core capabilities and processes. And then the final one relates to different enabling tools, things related to is a leadership model that has high-level assessment metrics that an organization can use to assess themselves on various elements within those 4 blocks and really come away with a sense of where their strengths are in terms of aligning purchasing and leadership and where there may be gaps, areas of focus.
Absolutely. It really focuses on this idea of procurement and logistics. Not necessarily structural integration, but the alignment of procurement and logistics to generate better customer value, better asset utilization, better funds value.
Right. So that idea we find is a powerful one in the work that we've done with industry. It continues to resonate with managers. And we actually have used that overarching focus on interfaces, of which purchasing and logistics is one, to drive a lot of our curriculum development in our lead programs. So I'd like to spend a little while now talking about one of our newest programs in which this whole focus on interfaces is really a driving idea. And that focus is the Global Supply Chain Executive MBA program. We are about to graduate within the next 3 months, our first inaugural class in the Global Supply Chain Executive MBA program. It's a 12-month program with a real focus on not only core MBA type of curriculum, but also key global supply chain differentials. Students come out with an MBA, but also with some real deep insights and application knowledge of managing an end-to-end global supply chain. The program is differentiated from a number of other programs in that it's engaged with global partners. We have partners in Europe, we have partners in Asia, and we have partners in Latin America that help us deliver this material. The program is actually delivered on 3 different continents, with the students actually convene at different locations on 3 different continents throughout the year.
So in what other ways, if you think about the student, kind of the demographics of the student group, is that all folks from here in Knoxville, Tennessee?
Yeah, there's been a great question. There's been a real focus in our recruiting efforts to bring in a diverse group of executives. There's a goal of having 10 years or more of experience, with some of that experience being global and actually living in a global location to work, and students that come from across the globe, from various different functions within the supply chain. So of our current group of 17, 7 of those students are from global locations. They're not solely from North America. Yeah, absolutely. And we have students from Asia, we have students from the Middle East, we have students from Europe.
Right. I tell you, from our perspective, the program has been very successful this year, and it's been an exciting group of students to work with. Ted and I are both core faculty members on that program, so we've had a lot of opportunities to work very closely on some really interesting projects, and it's been very successful.
Right. Yeah. We are currently recruiting our second class, and a lot of questions come up about what the requirements are for the program, et cetera. I mentioned 10 years being a goal. That is to know what it's like to manage within a global supply chain and be able to understand this material in a way that enables them to apply it better so they can achieve significant benefit for their organization.
So Ted, can you talk a little bit about the organizational action project and kind of how that fits in?
Sure. Yeah, that really ties right back to that comment on application. There are a number of assignments within the program that focus on students learning material, learning a concept or an assessment tool, for example, and taking that back to their organization and applying it so that they can actually generate benefit for their organization by learning by doing. Probably the champion of that is something that we call the Organizational Action Project, which is a program-long project that gets launched early in the program and continues throughout the year with the students in the program, in which they have to take some of the learnings that they've used, that they've gained, and apply it in their organization on a specific project. And the goal of that application is a return on investment of $1 million over the course of the next 3 years.
And do you think, looking at the students that are in the program this year, that will achieve that $1 million ROI?
Yeah, well, I mean, what the core faculty in the program do is serve as project advisors for students. I have 2 students that I'm currently advising, and one of mine is a transportation and fleet rationalization project. One of them is actually a within-country global distribution network redesign, looking at various customer segments and customer value requirements, as well as the existing distribution and manufacturing network to find ways to improve service to key customer segments while reducing costs.
And then, for instance, one of mine, it's really a pull project. It's really an logistics executive who's now reached out and has worked with the procurement organization of a large manufacturing company to create that full integration that we've been talking about earlier in the presentation. I guess, let me ask you one more question.
Sure.
If you took the first part of this presentation on purchasing and logistics leadership, and you thought about how that idea was really kind of how it is developed for the students in the Executive MBA program, can you describe that to those folks on the call today?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I would say that of the 17 students, I think, correct me on the numbers on this, but I would say that the student mix is about 10 of them have kind of a logistics background, maybe 8 of them have a logistics background, and then another 8 or 9 have an operations and or purchasing background. So it's almost an even split. And we're not going to teach somebody in our program that has a really strong purchasing background a whole lot about purchasing. What we can help them understand is how to align better as future leaders of an end-to-end supply chain so that they better understand the operations side and the logistics side and the demand integration side so that they can be better end-to-end managers. So a lot of our frameworks and concepts relate to these leadership models of how to better manage the alignment. And a lot of our applied assignments require them to go back to their organization and assess how well their organization is aligned across different parts of the supply chain, between demand and supply, between purchasing and logistics, some of their operational assets and those alignments. And the feedback we've gotten from students has been that it is really eye-opening for them to get outside their comfort zone and understand how they may really do great within their functional area, but there's real opportunity points within their organization for better alignment. If you think, that's great, Ted, thanks. If you think for a minute about how faculty work with students, we have many different kinds of students around, how is that experience different for an executive MBA student with us than that experience might be for somebody else? So it's interesting. Today is our first day of the fall semester for our undergraduate students. They're all back today. 28,000 or so undergraduates came to campus over the last few days and started classes today. And I always tell everybody that if you go to an undergraduate classroom and you tell them that the sky is green and tell them it's going to be on the test, they'll all write that down. Right? Every time. If you go into an executive MBA program with the same perspective, it is a sure recipe for failure. A faculty member in an executive MBA program really has to focus on facilitating the knowledge that's in the room. You bring best practice, cutting edge day knowledge about the topic than the faculty member teaching it, and you serve as the facilitator to really unlock that knowledge. Absolutely. Okay, we're going to wrap up our formal comments and open it up for some Q&A. If you'd like to type in any comments or questions for us, we will then read them back to the group and answer them. Best we can, as best we can. Don't be shy. It's always hard to get the first question in an audience of this size. All right, Ken, I'm going to throw some to you as I get these in. Okay. All right. Is this graded or non-graded? This is non-graded. Okay, good. This is non-graded. One question just came in. Do I need to take the GMAT for the program? No. Actually, oh, wait. Well, Ted, let me tell you about the GMAT. In fact, the GMAT is required unless it's waived on the basis of work experience. And so if you think about what that work experience requirement is, it's really 7 to 10 years, or if you already have a graduate degree. Okay. But a good question nonetheless. Yeah, so that application would go to the University of Tennessee graduate program, and based on kind of the holistic perspective of the student, they'll make a decision on a waiver of GMAT. Absolutely. My experience has been in this first year's class that with that 7 to 10 years experience, quite often they waive the GMAT. So if you think for a minute, Ted, what are some examples of applied learning opportunities that happen in the curriculum? Yeah, so we have 11 specific assignments that the students have to complete throughout the course of the year. them to take that material. Often it includes an assessment tool back to their organization and come up with some insights about their own organization.
So, Ted, for me, thinking back to the whole part of this presentation, I'm wondering a little bit, if my functional roots, my training, my experiences are all in logistics, and it's in a separate unit from procurement, what would motivate me to try to kind of cross that gap? Because in some ways, the way that we think about the world and orient our work from a logistics perspective is very different. I mean, it's very uncomfortable territory, right? To try to cross that divide, and sometimes it's actually organizationally very difficult to do, just to navigate the organization. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think I can address that pretty easily. One is that organizations are continually looking for new ways to compete, and something that's innovative today, within a couple of years, generally is not innovative. It's something everyone's doing. And I think that the innovation boundary, if you will, has moved to the point that organizations really need to find ways to break down the organizational barriers that have been self-created for very good reasons over time, to really try to unlock ways to increase the value they provide to customers. To talk about this as something we want to be, but we didn't have a lot of examples of companies that are doing it. I have recently seen a very large global organization in the tens of billions of dollars in sales that has organized itself around an end-to-end supply chain, in which the senior supply chain officer is the executive VP who answers to the CEO, so a C-level officer, with all functional chiefs within the supply chain. That plan, source, make, deliver idea, each of those functional chiefs reporting to that executive vice president of supply chain.
And you know what's really interesting about that example is that this is an example that Ted and I have participated in together with this company, is that talking with the functional executives, where they are absolutely on the same page, and they can talk to you about how a change in purchase price variance leads to a change in stock price, right? How does it affect? How does what I do affect the firm in a total value? So it's very, very exciting.
Yeah. And they've just begun, right? So they're also very excited about the opportunity initiatives that are out there that can lead to really exciting value creation. All right. Well, we thank you for your time on a busy afternoon. We are going to sign off for now. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email them